This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Hello everyone, Grace Ormsby here, back with a brand new episode of the Smart Property Investment Show, and we're all about those investor stories. I know I keep saying it, but it's something that myself and Phil are really, really keen on, getting real world stories of people and their experience in property. And I think it's a pretty interesting time to be an investor or looking maybe to buy a first home, a second home. There's a lot going on. There's certainly some uncertainty out there, even though, you know, we have talked with a lot of industry insiders and experts who know that this is a normal market cycle, but it doesn't necessarily in the real world quell any of those fears. So today I'm super pumped to have someone, a colleague of mine in the studio, James Mitchell. Some of you have probably heard his voice on this podcast before. He's been on a few times talking through the market and also as a first-time home buyer. And now he's just refinanced. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks for having me.
It's a pretty interesting time to be looking at property, as we do tend to do a lot of here at Momentum Media. And, you know, just I guess in the markets that we're operating in, we're talking with a lot of people who do have a vested interest in property themselves. And certainly a time, it's not the doom and gloom that people are talking about, but when you're playing with your own money, it certainly does make it a little bit more of a scary process. So talk us through, for those who haven't listened back.
Do a brief recap?
Yeah, let's go through that.
Okay, so Grace and I work together here at Momentum and have done for a number of years. And I've been on the show a few times, which has been great. The last time I was on was with Phil, and he basically wanted to find out. I had bought a house on Scotland Island, which is on Pittwater, and that's where I live. That's my principal place of residence.
PPOR?
There you go. As is a parlance of, that's what they say. And so that's where I live. And at the time, we were unsure whether we were going to stay or whether it was going to, whether we were going to release equity, that sort of thing. So, very brief recap. Bought the place settled at the end of January last year, 2021. Bought it for $580,000. That included stamp duty, and the property was valued at $800,000. It was a favorable sale because we bought it off my wife's parents. Because the LVR, because the value of the property was higher than what we paid for it, we didn't need a deposit. So we're in a very fortunate position to move into our first home on Scotland Island. And we pretty much started renovating straight away, and we did what we could ourselves. So repainted the inside. We did get some people in to lay carpets upstairs and floorboards and some plantation shutters and blinds and things like that. So it's made the place...
The aesthetics.
Yeah, exactly. The aesthetics made it a lot more homely. And then we were in two minds about whether to go into that equity to renovate. We just weren't sure yet. But one thing we did want to do was consolidate some debt. Mm-hmm. So we had 20 grand owing on our car loan and a personal loan of about 4.5 grand. And we spoke to the broker and we said, can we wrap all this into our home loan and also top up and take out 30 grand to finish off? It was actually floorboards and things like that, and bits and pieces. And he said, yeah, no problem. So our total mortgage now is $640,000. And then rates started to rise, and which is absolutely fine because we're on a really low rate. We're on 2.09%. And when we refinance, but obviously the rates have started to rise. And so with that, the market started to come down a bit. And so I saw this as a potential opportunity to release some more equity and invest if the prices are coming down. So I emailed my broker and said, would we be able to do a cash out and get $40,000 for some renovations to continue? We wanted to do built-ins and aircon, that sort of stuff. And then $100,000 for deposit and stamp duty for an investment property. And then also how much would we be able to borrow for an investment property? And it turned out $400,000 was what we could borrow for an investment property.
Okay. So when did you go and do that refinancing? Obviously it was before the rates moved at all, or?
Yeah, it was before they moved at all. We refinanced. I remember saying to the broker, I was like, can you can you increase our mortgage by 50 grand? Chuck in, so pay out the personal loan, pay out the car. We keep 30 grand for reno stuff or whatever it was, 25, and put me on a lower rate so that my repayments are either the same or lower. Yeah. And he did.
Okay.
It was pretty good because I was with CBA and then he refinanced me to St. George. And yeah, it was pretty remarkable. It went from like 2.69 to 2.09. He had me on this crazy low variable rate. And so the repayments were the same, but my car and personal loan had been paid out and I had 30 grand cash.
Insane.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Because you would have been paying interest on those other loans as well.
Yeah, massive.
Gosh, yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, so that was good. And, I felt like I was in a better financial position because I just don't have that, particularly that unsecured debt hanging over me.
And it's almost even just, one lot of repayments coming out each month or fortnight, as opposed to, okay, we need to keep track of what all these expenses are that we can't lose control of. Yeah,
exactly. And so my monthly repayments on the house were, what were they, $2,500. So it wasn't a lot, even though the mortgage had increased, the balance had increased. But then rates started to rise, and I think my mortgage rate now is like 4% or something. And we've basically, my wife and I have set, if the repayments go above $4,000 a month, we're going to have to stop drinking coffee and doing things like that. But up until then, it's okay.
And where are they at now? Sorry?
They're still under 3,000.
Okay.
Yeah, they're still under 3,000. And we're going to stay with variable rates. But interesting turn of events. All right. So
do we need to take a break before we come back and talk about this interesting
absolutely.
turn of
Let's
events?
take a break.
Yeah. We'll see you on the other side. Stay tuned to this episode of the Smart Property Investment Show.
Throughout 2022, we've already seen a huge ebb and flow in the Australian housing market. Property prices increased earlier in the year, but the rate hikes have slowed down price growth over the last few months. Even so, we've seen more new listings hitting the market than we've experienced in recent years. Plus, with many property owners having accrued a significant increase in equity, the market is hot for investors looking to snap up another property that may have reduced in price. To help you find these properties, the team at Pure Property Investment have done all the legwork to identify the top 30 suburbs that have not only shown growth throughout this year, but are also poised for strong capital growth over the next few years. Grab your free top 30 guide to property investment guide today at www.purepropertyinvestment.com.
Welcome back to this episode of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm joined by James Mitchell, colleague of mine here at Momentum Media.
Indeed.
I feel like I can't believe really that it was only 18 months ago that you bought that place.
Yeah, it was 18 months ago. We moved in May last year, but we bought it in January because my wife was pregnant. She was just about to give birth to our daughter, actually, when we settled.
And probably not where you want to be when...
No, and we were like, are we going to have the baby on the island? This is insane. So we didn't do that. We waited and then we moved in a bit later. But yeah, it's been good. I mean, so it's been good. It's challenging. Living on the island's challenging. Going on and off the island's challenging because it's a ferry. There's added expenses. I remember when CBA first did the mortgage over the property, they came back to us with, expenses,
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, we're going to have to increase this by $1,000 a month because living on an island, there's additional expenses.
Did they really factor that in?
Yeah, they factored it in. And I was like, well, offshore living, what are you talking about? But they're right. I literally pay $1,000 a month for getting on and off the island, for water taxi. Like, tonight I'm going to catch a water taxi home because the ferries won't run past 7 o'clock. That's $25 just to get home from 400 meters, So, and I don't have a boat yet. I should have bought a boat.
You can buy a tinny for very cheap.
I know I could. I know I can, but eventually. But so we're at this point now where we have done a top up. So we've got 3 loans now with St. George. We've got $640,000 as our mortgage on the house. We've got $40,000, which is for renovations, and $100,000, which is for a deposit for an investment property. And I was talking with my wife and we had been, you jump on realestate.com and you start looking at properties.
It's so easy. It's an
obsession.
Yeah.
And we went down the rabbit hole with that and I was like, oh, you can get this for that. And then I was like, oh, we can go to WA and you can get loads. And it became a bit of a spiral. I was in a bit of a rabbit hole with that. And then the brokers do stuff real quick. And he was like, yeah, digital signature, all the things. And we had signed everything for the top-ups, But when it came to the actual loan, I just paused for a minute and I was like, why am I actually doing this? Why do I want to buy an investment property? And it was purely driven by, prices coming down, the potential to get, but then I went back and I was like, well, but even then, like, why am I doing it? And it wasn't really for decent motives. It was, it was because I thought that I should, because I had been taught or listened to or whatever, that I've got equity in my home and therefore I should release it and invest. And I reached out to a buyer's agent in Perth, just thought maybe that would be the right route to go, but then I cancelled the meeting. I didn't want to do the call with them. They wanted to do a whole sort of like, educate me about the whole thing, and I just didn't want to do that. And I decided to tell the mortgage broker, I was like, you know what, don't worry about the investment loan for now. Like, I'm not going to do it, Even though it was all pre-approved, everything, pre-approved, I just didn't want to go ahead with it. And I suppose there's a few reasons for that. One is that, we are in the process of renovating, and there is things that need to be done to the house, that we've had such brutal weather over the last 12 months that our deck is completely wrecked. So we need to, basically, that needs to get rebuilt. There are things which need to be done to make the house more comfortable. And, we've got 2 young children. My son's almost 4, my daughter's 18 months. And we're building a nice home for ourselves, and we've got a beautiful life there. And I was like, I don't want to add any more stresses to my life right now. That was something really, and my wife and I talked about this. We're like, we don't need this, maybe sometime in the future. Yeah, so I paused for a minute and I questioned my motivations for jumping on that decision too quickly, even though, according to the broker and the bank, that, the financing was available, I could afford to do it, all that sort of stuff. In my gut, it didn't feel right. I was like, this might just tip the stress, happiness balance over the edge for me, So,
And I think it's something that we probably really don't touch enough here on the Smart Property Investment Show. It is always forward thinking about future wealth, long-term goals and everything. And a lot of sacrifices do have to be made. We talk to people all the time who have cut back on the things like the coffees and there is a limit to where that's okay for you to be doing before it does drive you up the wall a little bit.
I think it all comes down to your own personal circumstances and knowing your limitations. Like, put it this way, having too much going on. I've got enough going on already. I work and my wife works part-time. She's a nurse. Just getting on and off Scotland Island is hard. We've got the 2 kids. There's a lot going on and we're trying to renovate a house. If we were going to add an investment property whole process into that, even if we outsourced it somewhat to a buyer's agent, it would just be too much, There might come a time, but, really, I think pausing and thinking about it and journaling as well a little bit about, why am I doing this? It made me sort of realize that it's very easy for me to buy into a narrative, whether it's, an investment property, this or that, could be buying a pair of shoes. But that's something outside myself is going to, it's going to make my life just a little bit better. And it never really does. It never really does. Like, if I can find contentment with what I've got in my immediate moment, then that's all I really need. And so to cut a long story short, I basically talked myself out of buying an investment property, but I think it was for the right reasons. And I thought it would be worthwhile. I thought it's worthwhile sharing that, because that might be something which some people can take away and it'll help them through that process, particularly if they've got a busy life and they've got lots going on, which I think a lot of us do these days, If you don't, and, buying an investment property is like the major life decision that you're going to do for that year, then that's fine. But literally, I do like 5 major life decisions every year. It's insane. Our life's pretty hectic. My wife, and I are potentially going to be having more children as well, which is, we want a big family. And so we've got different priorities, and we like to live day by day.
I love that. And I feel like as well, it's not by any means that it's the wrong thing at the right time. A lot of people would say this is the right time to be buying an investment property, but that's not simply the case for anyone. At any point in any market cycle, it's going to be a good time for some people and a bad time for other people. And and for you, it's this time period that you're in now that it's a no-go. And And that's really cool and really honest and really refreshing to be hearing talked about because, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations around property and what's going on.
And it is fun to look at what's available and the price is coming down. It's exciting.
And you can buy, it's so easy to get onto that train.
Yeah.
But getting back off is a lot more of a conscious decision.
You got to be mindful about it. Because I find I can be quite mindless. I think we all can, but I can be quite mindless with the things I reach for as a distraction, like my phone. And property is just one thing. I can spend hours looking at property on my phone and then, come back into the real world and I would have made 5 decisions about, major decisions about what I'm going to do with property. But that's why I think, a lot of the guests who are on the show, they've got a great team around them, which is really important. People who advise them and maybe can sort of help them navigate that. But but for me, this is more of a behavioral thing, a personal thing in terms of, I can go into those processes. And for me, property can become a bit of an escape. I can sort of fantasize about a certain type of thing I want, because property's...
It's always aspirational.
It's aspirational, and it's, you can get attractive looking properties in nice locations and things like that. And so it is a fun thing to enjoy. But when it came down to signing the docs and actually going ahead, I was like, I just don't need this right now,
And I also want to stress, you already live in a pretty picturesque location. Nice. A lot of people, that is their end goal, to get what will be a forever home or, somewhere where
they're investing for that purpose.
Yeah, which you've already done. You've already achieved that.
Yeah, we're really fortunate. We're very lucky.
And you're still investing in that property as you go.
Yeah, and we're doing it for our own. Oh, actually, it's funny because my wife and I, we talk about this stuff a lot, because and our plans change all the time depending on how we're feeling.
Which is also fine, isn't it? Yeah.
But we talk about it,
Yeah.
And I mean, we've had all sorts of plans. One was because when the weather was really coming down, and the deck's getting destroyed, like living on Scotland Island in this La Nina sort of weather we've had, it's like living on the Kokoda Trail. It's insane. And so it was like, we fantasized, we're like, how good would it be to live in a house or a unit where you can park your car next to your house? You don't have to hike up a massive hill with your groceries. And that's still a fantasy, though. We love it. And we thought, because we both like the Blue Mountains, and so we thought maybe we can rent the place because we don't want to sell it, because it was a favorable sale, and so we want to honor that and also keep it in the family, so that maybe I can give it a favorable sale to my son or my daughter or something like that, and so on. I want to keep it in the family, but perhaps we could move to the mountains. But the prices there are holding their value still, and then the other option, which we're still on the fence about, is finishing the renovations and then renting it out and then renting ourselves. So I guess we've become rent investors. That's an option as well, because the rental market on Scotland Island is actually really tight. There's only, there might only be 1 or 2 properties available for rent at the moment. And people who are looking to buy there kind of want to try before they buy, because it's that sort of lifestyle. So we've got options, and I think that's a blessing. I'm very grateful to have options, but ultimately just having a roof over my head and one place where we can all come together, my family and I, that's all I really want, Yeah.
Well, we'll take another break there. We'll be back in just a moment with more of James Mitchell's not quite Renvestor story, but refinancing, good decision-making stuff. See you on the other side.
Have you considered adding Perth property to your portfolio? Momentum Wealth has experts on the ground to help you find the best opportunities in WA. They'll take care of everything from shortlisting and inspecting properties, right through to negotiating the best deal on your behalf. And when it comes to managing your property, they have experts for that too. Contact their award-winning team today at momentumwealth.com.au and get your advantage in Perth's property market.
Welcome back to this episode of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm joined by James Mitchell. And James, Scotland Island, for those that aren't familiar with this place, can you give us a quick, obviously, we've alluded to enough that people, I'm sure, have worked out that it is an island.
Yep,
you do have to get a boat to get on and off the island.
It's offshore living. Yeah. That's what they call it, offshore living. Every time I see that written down or someone says offshore living, I have to think, I'm like, is that me? I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, it is me.
Is it a tax haven? It gives that vibe,
I wish
doesn't
it was.
it? It does.
No, we pay council tax, and the Northern Beaches Council does very little with that.
You wouldn't even really be able to utilise those beach car parking passes they have up there.
Yeah, no, I can.
You can?
I've got a Northern Beaches Council car parks and a Church Point car parks. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll give you the lowdown. I'll give you the skinny on Scotland Island. So it's on Pittwater. Pittwater's on the Northern Beaches. So Pittwater is basically, if you're at Palm Beach, you've got the Pacific Ocean, and on the other side of that little strip of land is Pittwater. That's what Pittwater is. And if you paddle round or you catch a speedboat, Scotland Island's in the middle of there. Really beautiful location. Not many people know about it. And I think I might have shared this on the last episode I was on. Prior to COVID, there wasn't really much of a market on there. You could buy a house for $600,000. But COVID really opened that market up. And there was one particular agent, a guy called Murray, and he started getting these multi-million-dollar figures for people on the island when he was selling their places. There's a story actually where some people came to look at the waterfront places, obviously the expensive ones. And we're not a waterfront place, by the way. And so there's a story, I don't even know if it's true, but with these people who came to look at a place that he was selling as an agent. And it was, 2.5 or whatever million. And they were like, yeah, we kind of like it, but we actually like that place next door. Can we have a look at that place? And he said, well, it's not for sale. And they said, the buyers were like, well, let's just go knock on the door and have a chat with the people. They did. They sat down and had a cup of tea. And the buyer said, I want to buy a house. And the person was like, ha, 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 I'll never sell. He was like, maybe for $5 million. And the guy was like, all right. So that set the precedent there.
Yeah.
And then it was almost every house next door to that was like boom, 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 boom. And I think over the period of 12 or 18 months, this guy turned over a good percentage of the properties, waterfront properties on the island. And that obviously increased the median value because there's only so many properties on the island. And valuations is such a weird business. When you think about it's so weird because that little story I told you, valuations are tied to comparable sales, right?
Yeah, there's that aspect.
Yeah, so no one actually has come to my house and looked at it and tapped on the walls. And
checked on those.
Yeah, and been like, oh, yeah, actually, no, this place isn't any good. It's purely an electronic valuation based on comparable sales of properties of that size and that sort of thing. So when we refinanced, the valuation came out at $1.4 million.
Stop it.
It did. And I laughed actually when the broker printed this out. I said, you should probably send someone round there, like.
Are you sure?
Yeah. And I was like, and he was like, nope, that's what it is. And the funny thing with valuations is like, when they come in high like that, that means that's telling you how much equity I've got in my property. And I can borrow against that. That's the madness of it. So I find that mad, because a guy like that can just come on and be like, yeah, $5 million. And then it increases everyone's property and you can borrow against it.
I mean,
madness.
It's on a small scale. It's literally what's going on in the Australian property market right now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And
you can just see it there.
Yeah. And I think, so we benefited, obviously, like everyone did, rising tide. And so the valuation came in high. As a result, we were able to borrow, that $40,000, like I said towards the beginning of the podcast for the renovations. And with that $100,000, which was for the deposit and the stamp duty, I've just kept that and I'm going to use that for renovate. I'm going to use that to rebuild the deck. The quote to rebuild the decks, top and bottom, is like $80,000. It's a lot,
Construction costs rise. Yeah. It's all material, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll use up pretty much all of that money, which will take our mortgage to $780,000. And I've got a rule that I don't want the property to exceed the valuation when we bought it, which was $800,000. Even though we bought it for $580,000, it was valued at $800,000. So it's just under that, and then it'll be a case of paying down the debt. And potentially when we're back at around $500,000 on our mortgage, then we can look at doing something else. But I think after the renovations, a period of consolidation, paying down debt, particularly as the rates start to rise, and more kids maybe.
I think a lot of people would kill for an LVR of 50%.
Yeah, I know. It's lucky. It's very fortunate. Like I count my blessings for sure, And also not everyone's in a position to do that. But Yeah, we were very, very lucky. But even on, setting aside the favorable sale, with the price we got, it was valued in January 2021, January last year, at 800, and it was valued less than a year later.
Which is ridiculous.
At 1.4.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
So then, I guess, following on from that, do you think you'll see that valuation go down?
I'd say so.
With the, and do you expect it to be as much as, the 10 to 15% that's being forecast?
If the next valuation, let's say we got it valued at the end of the year when our renovations are done or whatever. First of all, and this might be a question which, a listener or someone might be able to help out with. If they're doing valuations based on comparable sales and no one actually goes around, I don't see how the renovations I'm doing to my house would even
add to the equity.
Add to the equity. So I wonder how that works. I don't have that knowledge. Maybe you get an independent one. I'm not sure. But that's an interesting question. But I think they would, if it came down to $1 million, that would make sense to me. If the property after the renovations and with the land and everything like that was valued at $1 million and I've got a $780,000 mortgage on it, that makes sense to me. Yeah. I mean, that seems like a reasonable price. Anything more than that is just insane. Yeah.
And it obviously would be a lot less stressful if it does go down and you haven't, then gone out and bought something else and you're stretching yourself in that way.
Exactly. And also, I never think my property's worth $1.4 million because to me, that's just a made up number purely because I heard that story about the guy who came and said, what about 5 million? So I can see where these numbers come from, and it's just demand and strange market forces. So I don't put much confidence in that figure. I expect that figure to go down. It seems like an anomaly to me. It just doesn't make sense. $800,000 is what the property is worth to me, and we've finally caught up with what the real value of it is. That's all. I
mean, it comes back to as well, I guess, that taking it day by day.
Yeah.
Should you really be taking valuations into your thinking?
Not for me. Maybe if you're a seasoned investor and because valuations are that's critical to an investor because you're looking at, renovating and, capital growth and then getting the val done and that's all how much equity you can get. I can't run my life like that. I just don't have the mind for it. I don't have the character or disposition for it.
You and Excel spreadsheets.
Excel spreadsheets. None of that. And also, it's not even that. It's not even the figures. It's expectation. You know what I mean? I'm putting my sense of peace in something which is outside of me. It's almost like a gamble. Well, I'm hoping this pays off, and I think it will. And I'd prefer just to, not do that, sit at home, play with my kids.
And take the bricks and mortar part of that's what it's all about for
honestly,
you.
When it's been raining as much as it has, I'm just glad my roof's not leaking.
Yeah, and you're not sliding down the hill.
Yes.
But James, thank you so much for your time today. I think it's been really, really important to outline that, even though there's all this good news out there about it being a good time to invest, not everyone is in the same boat. Yeah, and I hate to be using that word considering you live offshore, but, it fits.
Oh, yeah. I'll get a boat one day. Don't worry.
But, I mean, anyone else who's out there that feels the same way, maybe they have looked into refinancing, getting their next property, reach out, let us know. We want to be hearing from you as well because I'm sure James is not the only one going through this at the moment. But thank you for your time. And,
no worries, Grace.
We'll see, 1, how those renovations hold up, and 2, how that valuation goes maybe at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And we'll keep following this journey because it will be an interesting one, I think. To everyone who is listening along, we hope you have enjoyed this episode. Please like or review us on whatever platform that you do listen to your podcasts on. Don't hesitate, reach out, editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. And as always, stay up to date with everything on our website. All the property news you need is there. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. Until next episode, stay safe and well wherever you are listening from. Bye. Bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Would you like the latest news and insights in HR, leadership and people management? HR Leader has you covered. Subscribe at hrleader.com.au.